Eric Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today I'm going to show you how to make this sound with Hive 2. So it's quite a lovely bass sound. It's inspired by an artist named Opio. If you know him, I really like his work. And this is a sound that is sort of inspired by a lot of the things he uses in his tracks. So let's go ahead. Let's just start from the top and work our way down. So first off, I knew I wanted a sawtoothy thing that had that glorious low end sort of gritty texture that saw waves tend to get when you play them low. So I've got a wavetable, but you can actually just do this with a saw wave. I decided to check out some wavetables that were close to saw waves, like this one, because you can move them in interesting ways. So if you come over here to the wavetable, they're up here, and you just click wavetable, and I went to the distorted reso sweep wavetable in the complex category. I brought the tables up to 3, and then I'm moving this position around with the LFO. So you see the wavetable multi-position down here is connected via LFO1. And this LFO is actually connected to a couple things. And it's not all showing down here because I use knobs in some cases to connect it up. And this is really, really important for the rhythm of the sound. So you notice it's got this natural like movement in it. Anyways, it's got this natural movement in it. That's created by the sync. So it's got a sync of 1:1 and it's unipolar. So it being unipolar, what that means is when it starts modulating this position, it's only going to start from the beginning and only go up and down from here. It will never go below. And this is actually pretty important in a lot of areas of this particular sound, especially with the bandpass filter, because if you actually have the bandpass filter move down, it gets really, really messy in the low end and doesn't sound as cool. So you're going to want to make sure that you've got unipolar on right here. And that's the LFO pretty much set up, and that's the main sound source, is this guy doing this thing. And if we play this, that's what's causing that movement, and we're getting that lovely rhythm out and how the rhythm is sort of moving with it. Now the key rhythm, the one that's creating that like that thing, that's actually the bandpass. So we're gonna get to that. I also have a unison of 2 on the oscillator 1, and the detune's very low, but the unison of 2 helps with, I like the clarity, but it also just sort of smooths the sound out just a touch. If you actually go more, you can get this really neat sort of high-end screech sort of a thing if we dial up the unison like a lot. So that's pretty cool too, but I like the clarity that 2 offers. And it sort of balances the high end a little more how I would like it. And so that's what's going on right there. And so with these things set up, we've got the makings for our sound. What I want to do now is control a couple parameters. So the first one is, I know I wanted it to have a big pitch bend, you know, boom, that kind of a thing. And so in order to do that, I'm actually using the modulation envelope 1 to move the pitch down. And that's set up here. I just simply grabbed this and moved it to the tune. And I actually went directly to semitone instead of tune. It says tune here, but I dragged it to the semitones. So it's actually moving this guy down. And the way this works is the attack hits and then it comes down. And that's what creates the sudden pulse at the beginning. So that's what gives us the attack at the start of every note. So that's a pretty important characteristic for this sound, handled by modulation envelope 1, simply controlling the semitones. And it pops up as tune down here. So all right, up next we're going to get into the 2 filters. So there are 2 filters going on. The first filter is just a low pass that's meant to control the timbre of the sound as we move along. And that's actually being controlled by mod envelope 2. So it's this guy over here. And I simply set it up to control the cutoff directly. Now, another way you could have done this that I didn't think about when I was making it was you could actually set up the mod envelope knob right here to be controlled by mod envelope 2. And then away you go, you're cooking with gas and you can just turn this up. But I didn't think of that, so I just connected this right to the cutoff. You can see it appears here, and it's simply pulling down and up according to this envelope here. The idea was to just get a nice texture as I was going through. So you see it dials back right at the very beginning and then just lets it on up. And that actually was, I like it a lot more. You could try it out without it. You'll get a much brighter texture if we were to just dial this back. See, and for me, that's just a bit too bright for the track. Kind of takes room away from other things. And I think actually makes it a little less interesting. What we've got is, we've got this set up. Up next is the filter 2. This is very, very important for the characteristic of the sound. So this is being controlled via the LFO1, and this LFO1 is being controlled here. So you can see it's connected to the first LFO, and it's being told to modulate a bit. Now, this LFO is unipolar, so it's only going to push up from where we set our initial cutoff. So this is actually moving the bandpass up and down, and you're going to want to pick a bandpass filter. And all I did was I simply selected that and I dialed the resonance up a bunch and looked around for a cutoff value that I thought sounded good. And also on both these filters, you notice the input is up a little bit. And this is going to change how it hits and interacts with the filter. And so I wound up settling on these just by ear. And if we play this, that's what's causing the that sound to move around. If we actually bring the cutoff much lower, and then do it, you can get some pretty cool stuff that way. You can see though, there's like, there's a little bit of, it sounds a little poofy down there, and I didn't like that. So I settled for a higher value that just was a little bit more clear and consistent. And it's gonna change its sound a little bit every time because of this unison that we have set here. So that's what creates the variation in sound. And if you set it lower, if you actually get rid of the unison, you'll get more consistent results if that's something that you'd like to experiment with or do. And that is the basics of the general patch behavior. So you've got the general sound down now, but what we need to do is now dress it up a bit. So if we come over to the effects, in the effects, we have quite a few things. First thing I did was I brought the chorus to the front and I set it to ensemble. If we actually change to dramatic, it changes quite a bit. You get a lot more of that saw sound coming through, a little bit cleaner. And I didn't like that as much. Ensemble does a good job of sort of mixing it all together. Especially as that resonance sweeps. Man, that's just beautiful. So this was pretty important. And I just settled on these controls by ear. I didn't have like a particular concept in mind or anything. Up next was distortion, settled on foldback. Again, mostly by experimentation. Not a whole lot going on there. There is an EQ cut in the mid. So you notice the gain on the mid has been brought down. And this was in context with what my snare and kick are doing and things. This isn't necessarily a final move, but it creates a hole in the sound that lets other things fill in. And so this was a move that I actually came in and did after the fact. And I've also got some compression going on here. But not very much at all. I sort of just turned this on, but I didn't really touch it after that. And it just became sort of a byproduct of what I was working on at the time. So after all that, that is what's going on inside of Hive 2. And we've got the basics of the patch. What we want now is I cleaned it up a bit afterwards. So if we take these things off, that was the sound coming out of Hive 2. Which I still think is pretty cool. But obviously I did a couple additional things afterwards. And I also note that I did not use the reverb at this stage. I didn't do that because I wanted a little more flexibility with the reverb at the end. And the reverb in here wasn't the right reverb for what I wanted to do here. And so I opted to go afterwards and add a separate verb. So after this, let's take a look at the processing. So we've got an OTT going on. So with the compression here, I just sort of set it to whatever I thought would sound cool. There was a lot of experimentation and moving bands in radically different directions. This is what I settled on, is just to sort of clean up the overall sound. So if I actually take this off, that was our original. And if we put it on, it rebalances the different areas just via the 3 bands. And I pretty much just messed with the band positions, the percentages, and the levels a little bit. And that's it. Not a whole lot there. So up next, we have a Pro Q3, and all this is doing is cutting off some of the low end, the really, really low stuff. And this is something I'd probably revisit more and sort of adjust it as I figure out more of what I want to do with the kick drum. And also creating a small hole for the snare. And these are adjustments that as I work on the track, you know, I'll make more and more. But it's good to get just the general way things are going to fit together. So if I turn this off, here's what it sounded like before. And here's what it sounded like after. So the reverb on the snare in particular comes through quite a bit better. And yeah, I just really like how this works. It's a subtle move, and it's one that as the mix moves along, you know, I'm going to adjust. And then finally, we have Comet. Now this one, I started with just the default and then adjusted from there. Brought the diffusion to 40. I was experimenting with higher levels of diffusion. And this is a reverb plugin, by the way. The size is at 22 and the K is at 34. I found this to be kind of the sweet spot with these. If I pushed any one much more, it got way, way, way too much reverb in the high end. But I wanted some like sparkle to come off on the top of the sound because we have that beautiful resonance moving around. And so I did that. I brought the low damp to 100 and the high damp down. And when we add this on, this really just helps it fit in. And like, I love how it interacts with the resonance. Here's with it off. Here's with it on. So suddenly this puts it in an atmosphere. And that is pretty much how you can make this sound. So with these things, you know, you just need an EQ, a multiband compressor, and a reverb. And these are just the ones that I happen to pick. But as far as Hive 2 goes, the general idea is you get a saw wave, you do a little bit of pitch variation at the very beginning, you add in 2 filters. One of those filters you have move around in a lovely way, and I set that up with a unipolar LFO. That's the basic core of the sound. The rest is dressing it up and sort of getting the spectrum into a place that you really like. But the main behavior of the patch is encapsulated in essentially 2 filters, an oscillator, and an LFO, and some envelopes to control the filters. But that's it. If you have any questions about this, let me know, subscribe, and have a blessed day.